Once again, thank you so much for joining us. We are on week 6 of the COVID-19 WARN webinar. We'll be waiting a few more minutes, letting a few others connect, and then we'll be getting started. For those of you joining us on YouTube Live, thank you. We appreciate you. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. We are on week. There we go, and now I'm on mute, so we won't get feedback. We'll be getting started here in the next moment or two. So thank you for being connected. Are the panelists ready to go?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is week number 6 of the COVID WARN webinar. During today's webinar, we'll be connecting mostly through Zoom. And inside of the Zoom dialogue, you have 2 ways in which to communicate with the panelists. You can either use the chat function or the question and answer function. When you do use chat, you're welcome to put in a full question or just interact, share with other participants. And in order to do that, we do ask that you change your setting on the to location here. You change it to all panelists and attendees. Simply click the to and the drop down, highlight all panelists and attendees, and that will allow you to speak or text with everyone that's on the webinar today. If you would like to ask a full question, maybe has a little bit of length to it, you're welcome to use the question and answer box. Simply type your question and hit send in the lower right corner. We will not be utilizing any phone communications, so if you raise your hand, I will just simply ask you to put your question into the text box if possible. Those of you that are joining through YouTube Live, there is also a chat box that is located on the right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to put in any comments or chats there, and we will be looking at those and monitoring them throughout the webinar. Lastly, you are being recorded. This webinar will go on our website under the WARN webinar page. If you haven't been there so far, please do so. You can find it at vawarn.org. And with that, we'll go ahead and record, and I'll turn it over to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, I hope everybody's having a good afternoon. Welcome for joining us for our weekly WARN COVID-19 update. This helps support EPA and FEMA and all their guidance. We're trying to push out as much information as we can to everybody as we get it. I want to thank all of our state agency partners that are able to join us. And our Virginia WARN members that are online, all of our utilities that are listening in, and any additional partners that we may have, whether you're a consultant or maybe you're a manufacturer or a supplier. We thank you for being on here and hearing the issues that our water industry is dealing with right now as we work through these COVID issues. Okay. All right, so we start out with our situational report and update. The current status of the pandemic, we've got some slides on that. Our agency updates from VDH and Department of Environmental Quality. We've put out in the past how they are working to get us the most updated information as they get it. One of our panelists today is from VDH ODW, and he'll be speaking to us a little bit about some of our economic issues that we're dealing with. Another one is DPOR around licensure. We have a question out to them right now. We'll try and get some updates on what's going to happen with our February 2021 requirements for our CEU updates. As soon as we as the Warren have that, we'll get that posted for you. Okay, next slide. There we go. So here's our VDH map showing our COVID cases. So right now I'm not going to say we've leveled off, but the amount of cases seem to be steady. Roughly a new 700 cases per day is about where we are on the average. This is yesterday's map. There was some technical difficulty with the VDH page today, and we'll try and get some new numbers for you as soon as we can. But this is a snapshot of things. So why is this important to know this? Why do we go over this every week? This helps you understand how you need to plan your resources and your responses, how the cases, even though they're not growing at an astronomical rate anymore, but we are still seeing new cases, and this could still have impact on us as a utility. Okay, this also is coming from the VDH map. This is what was on the governor's press conference yesterday, and Scott's on. He'll be able to talk a little bit about this too. But this is what's helped guiding him for that May 15th deadline that he's shooting for right now. Scott, do you want to speak on this?
Sure, Ike. As Ike mentioned, this is the pertinent data for dictating the reopening of Virginia, the phase 1. There'll be additional data combined into the phases on hospitalizations. And so this is the critical chart. That's part of the reason the VDH has now migrated that concurrent with the map. When you enter their site and you're looking at Virginia COVID data, we've had some questions in the past. When will Virginia reopen? The reopening and subsequent movement of phases are connected to this particular chart.
Okay. So as we do move to that May 15th, the one thing that we need to keep in mind is we'll probably see a little bit of surge again after we see our fall as people start commingling again. But that shouldn't be the steady state to see that increase. That should just be those one-offs as people start getting back to their new norm. Okay. Next slide. All right. This is another one coming from the Virginia hospitals. This is showing how resources are being implemented right now and the pull on resources out there. We're still seeing a strong deficiency in the ability for people to get the PPE they need in a lot of these environments, industries. We were having a conversation this morning here that there's nurses that are going to work and they're getting like one mask to handle a full day's worth of work or 2 days worth of work because they just don't have the supply. Okay. Next slide. All right, so our first speaker this morning is going to be Barry Matthews from ODW. He's the division director for the capacity development group there. Barry, I'm going to turn this over to you, and if you guys have any questions along the way, please post them in the chat, and we'll get them to Barry as soon as we can. All right, thank you, Barry.
All right, thank you, Ike, and good afternoon to everyone that's on. I was asked to talk about some of the financial realities of COVID-19, and in thinking about this, I came up with 4 key points that I wanted to discuss this afternoon. The first one is that we've all been impacted financially with the consequences of the coronavirus. There's not a person in the country and probably not a person around the world that hasn't been impacted in some way, shape, or form economically. The second item that I wanted to talk about was the impact of water systems and how they've had to alter some of their shutoff policies and how it's impacting their collections. The third point is regarding emergency operation plans or continuity of operation plans and how most plans did not anticipate a prolonged financial hardship, and we'll talk some about that. And the last item that we'll talk about is if you didn't start planning for a rainy day event, which we highly recommend that you do with a reserve fund. It's a little too late to start planning for this event, but it's not too late to start planning for the next event. Next slide. So the financial consequences are that the Dow Jones average on January 2nd was at 28,830 and dropped to a low on March 13th at 18,592. Over 10,000 points of value were lost in that time period. But there's a positive way of looking at this, and that's what I want to focus on as much as we can. And that's investors see an opportunity within the market. And as recently as when I put these slides together, the market had come back to 23,724 on the Dow Jones. And so that's a recovery of over 5,000 points, so that we're just sitting below 5,000 points from where we were on January 2nd. So there has been already a rebound to the market economy. And I wanted to make the point that market value is driven by investors historically, but that's really not what we are seeing currently. It's not investors that are driving the market. Business quarterly earnings for the first quarter of the year were absolutely rocked by the social distancing measures, the stay-at-home orders, and business closures across the country. Also, the high unemployment rate will force a slow recovery as we try to hire back employees into the businesses as they reopen. But I wanted to point out that this really presents an opportunity for water systems to recruit new people into the industry. There are advantages of working in the water sector, and I feel like this is a real opportunity for us to reach out to potential employees and let them know that we're here, that we stay employed, that we are always at work, and that water never shuts down. The other point that I wanted to make here is that there are concerns about a second COVID wave that will slow entry back into commerce and generating revenues. Next slide. So most of you have been told that you need to keep everyone connected, and the State Corporation Commission extended that order until June 14th. But according to the commission, they expect all customers to have to pay past due bills eventually. So with that, there's a possible reduced demand from commerce, businesses, and industrial facilities. And that has a different impact on different waterworks across the Commonwealth. Smaller waterworks may not see much impact at all as we move from small commercial back to residential usage. They may not see as much impact as the larger facilities are seeing with the shutdown of commerce and business and industrial facilities across the state. But we continue to face expenses to keep the water utilities operating. There's been certain sectors where costs have declined, like gasoline, but other sectors where costs have increased, like PPE. So the other issues that we need to consider with revenue as the economy starts to reopen is that utilities may need to consider some issues. You may need to consider payment plans for people that have large outstanding bills. You may need to consider revising your shutoff policies to deal with issues related to COVID-19. You may need to write new policy on past due write-offs and the opportunity costs associated with bill collection. When does it become an issue of spending too much time to collect the money, that it doesn't make collection worth the effort. And one last issue that you may want to consider is customers gaming the system. And by that, I mean that they're hearing that they don't need to pay their bills. They financially can pay their bills, but they're just going to wait. So how do you deal with those customers? And then the last issue with all of this, obviously, is most systems are going to face some kind of revenue gap. It's unfortunate, but it's likely to happen. And you may have to consider raising or adjusting rates to cover the revenue versus expenditure gap. So you'll want to consider those things and take that into consideration as you start planning. Next slide. So emergency operation plans are required through the Commonwealth of Virginia Emergency Services and Disaster Laws 2000, but few emergency operation plans considered pandemic response, and even fewer considered a time frame of multiple months like we had been facing. They do not primarily consider budget impacts due to loss of revenue. This is not something that we have really seen in the past, and it's not something that we've really planned for. As a matter of fact, in the America's Water Infrastructure Act, it requires a risk assessment, but the EPA template did not even include a pandemic category. So if you're using the EPA template to put together an emergency operation plan, you have to go to the other category to add pandemic. They include things like volcanic eruption, but not pandemic, which I find interesting being a geologist. And Virginia itself focuses more on extended power outages than it does on issues like pandemic. So it's a matter of everyone really not being prepared for this kind of a situation. Next slide. So it really is too late to start planning for rainy day for this event, but we need to learn from the event, and we need to look at things that we need to consider moving forward. Looking backward to what if we had done something differently is really not productive. We need to plan now for future financial decisions. For small systems that don't have a budget, this is why we preach that you have to have a budget and that you have to have reserves. If you do have a budget, and most of you out there will have some kind of a budget, you may need to look at it closely and revise it and make some hard decisions. I have gone through this personally in my career a few times, and often the easiest choice, the easiest way to respond to reduction in revenue is often not the most effective way. In my opinion, what we need to concentrate on and look at is people coming first and making good personnel choices. We need to learn from this event and plan for unanticipated problems. Some of the things that we need to consider, again, this situation, this emergency presents a unique opportunity to recruit new operators, because water is an essential function. We're not going to go away. It offers stability in uncertain times. There's no event that would ever necessitate shutting waterworks down. And I think we've proven that through this crisis. And a positive attitude can really define the way we respond to this crisis. One of the things that I was thinking about was it has shown us what coverage really means, what kind of operator backup that we really require in an emergency, and the kinds of contracts that we need to have in place to cover the time that we need to have operators on site. So I would suggest to you that you not be too quick as you go through your budget and you go through reductions in costs, don't cut personnel hours. Those operators that are out there are doing a fantastic job and are dedicated to providing quality drinking water to all the citizens of the Commonwealth. Don't respond to this event by cutting their hours. One of the things that would be impacted by cutting hours would be the preventive maintenance that they do at slow times. You don't want to have to go back and do maintenance that should have been done through this time. You also don't want to impact the morale of your employees. And training, there are going to be a lot of lessons coming out of the pandemic crisis of 2020, and training is going to be critical for your employees to understand what those lessons are. So you want to make sure that you have some budget for training, getting people out to events when we can, and allowing them to learn about the industry, the impacts from this pandemic, and feeling like that they're a valued part of the organization. And you also don't want to be too quick to cut safety. We've seen that PPE is an extremely important part of our response to the pandemic. So safety needs to be considered as an essential part of your budget as well. So what we recommend in capacity development is that a rainy day fund be established, but it's the last of the three reserves that we talk about. The first reserve that we talk about is funding operation and maintenance, so that you have a ready supply of funds to do your normal activities. The next reserve that we talk about funding is your capital improvement plan, so that you're continually improving, revitalizing, renovating, and updating your water treatment systems. And the last then is the rainy day fund. It's the last because these costs are unknown, but it's why the Environmental Finance Center Network, the Office of Drinking Water CAP Dev staff, Southeast RCAP, and other technical assistance providers preach about funding a rainy day account. It's for events like this. And it's also the reason that we talk about the financial measure of days of cash on hand. How long can you go to weather a revenue downturn without having to dip into any other accounts? So we have seen a lot of people not be very happy about talking about days of cash on hand, but it is a good financial measure for how you can weather an emergency event like we've gone through. So the last slide that I have for you today is a couple of links to information from the Environmental Finance Center Network, a blog post that they've done that gives you more specific information about these issues, and some general information from EFCN. And I would like to leave you with a little additional information on what the Office of Drinking Water and the Capacity Development Program can provide you. There are 4 sustainability coordinators located around the state that can help you with planning, financial issues, and provide you with resources. Julie Floyd is in our Culpeper field office. Tamara Anderson is in Lexington and serves Southwest Virginia. Susan Miner works out of our central office and serves Southside and Southeast Virginia. And Jarrett Talley is now serving the non-community systems throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. Again, I'm Barry Matthews. My email address is barry.matthews, 2 T's, @vdh.virginia.gov. And we also provide, during normal times, extensive amounts of training outreach and work with Virginia Tech to bring you the Drinking Water Short School. And I'd be glad to answer any questions. I haven't seen any pop up yet, but Ike, that concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Barry. We did have a couple people post some stuff in chat. Jim from Virginia Beach, he's talking about how in the long run to keep the workforce up, showing them that you care and that they will help in recruitment. He mentions the point that we are experiencing significant retirements around this point. And then we've got some other posting in there about what about working or, our succession planning, especially with the fact that we have hurricane season coming up. We're still going through the COVID pandemic right now, and CDC is warning us of a potential second round of the COVID pandemic coming back in winter. So these are some things that we do need to be thinking about around our ERPs and our tube plan. And then for Barry, I do have one question from Jim. He is asking, what is the status of the water short school in Blacksburg this year?
So Jim and everyone, as far as I know, Virginia Tech is still planning to put the water short school on. There have been questions about how that's going to happen. And we're trying to seek some information about how to do that with the possibility of some social distancing. But so far, the plans are for that short school to occur in August. And I will let you all know through Virginia, if I hear anything differently about that, I can let Ike and Geneva know and they can get that information out to you.
Perfect. We appreciate it. Thank you, Barry. Margie also says to keep in mind that this is a good time to take what we've gone through and make it a lessons learned. Maybe we want to capture that. And this would be a good time to look at our SOPs and ERPs as we, even though we're still in it, but start looking at some of the things we've had to change along the way and don't let it be forgotten. Actually capture it and start working it into our plan. All right. If there's any more questions for Barry, go ahead and post them in the chat and we'll get them up to Barry. Our next speaker is Officer J.A. Johnson. He's a crime prevention specialist with the city of Roanoke, and he's going to kind of give us some tips and recommendations around crime prevention. And part of this is, as we discussed, we're about the shutoffs after we come out of this stay-at-home order somewhere around June 14th when people have to start paying their bills again. How are we going to handle those escalations? So I'm going to turn it over to Officer Johnson right now. Glad to have you on board with us.
Yeah, thank you folks for the invitation. I do appreciate it. This is Officer Josh Johnson with the Roanoke City Police Department. We're going to be drinking from the fire hose, so a lot of information in a short amount of time I'm going to get to you guys. I usually start my presentations, I teach active shooter, and I'm going to keep using it until the chief tells me not to. When seconds matter, the police are minutes away. And I think that kind of sheds a light on what we do, what you guys do as employers, putting your employees in the best positions to handle crisis is really going to affect how they respond, the mitigation of loss of property and life when it comes to these critical incidents. So one of the big things I see, I do a lot of security site assessments, but the biggest thing I see in critical incidents is the lack of response or lack of education from the employees on how to handle them. We're generally pretty good about new hires and training them on emergency action plans, what to do in critical incidences. But those of us that have been there long enough, day to day, you forget about those things. And so I know you guys are doing briefings in the morning. Some of your teams are doing briefings on the outside. I encourage your managers, your team leaders to educate them about emergency action plans, not just the safety aspect of it when they're working, but what to do when you have that irate customer that walks in or somebody that comes up on a job site. Like Barry was saying, we're in a very stressful time. You guys represent the water authority, and I think most people probably don't even recognize it, maybe that you guys aren't even the government, but there is definitely stress for the government, stress financially. So we need to encourage our employees to be safe while they're out on calls, in their sites if we're dealing with employees or customers that come in. So one of the big things is making sure our employees know how to handle complaints, where they need to go, the phone numbers they need to go, the websites, because people are frustrated, and you need to give them a way forward, how to handle those complaints. Another big thing is how to report critical incidents. So they do have a phone call that doesn't go well. Somebody makes a threatening phone call. Somebody says something that's concerning. How do we report those to managers? How do we get those things out? OSHA has some guidelines for workplace safety and active shooter. And one of the big things is duty to warn. You know, if we do have that threatening person that makes a comment, whether that's violence against the water authority, violence against property, or violence against an employee, we need to make sure that all employees are aware of that. I'll hit on a little bit moving forward, but you definitely need to establish a good relationship with your local law enforcement. We have a really good relationship with the water authority here, where Neil Norris is able to call me up whenever they have these critical incidents. I'm part of our Roanoke Valley Behavioral Threat Assessment team, which just affords us a little bit more time and resources to handle these type of things, because typically when you call 914, that person, that agitated person, the person makes a threat, that patrol officer is going to handle the call, write the report, and then have to move on to other reports. And so you establishing that relationship with local law enforcement, whether that's your crime prevention officers, whether that's somebody with their behavioral threat assessment team, if your jurisdiction has that, that's definitely critical. One of the things we're not doing right now, but I think moving forward, is having some of that training in safety for active shooter or workplace violence, active threat training. I know some local legal teams do it, law firms do it, so that might be something you can reach out to, even local law enforcement. I think it's good to establish those relationships, have your employees hear it from law enforcement officers and find out what's important to them when you're dealing with a threat. When we talk about threats, we have two different types of threats. So we have the internal threat and the external threat. And I'm going to hit on internal real quick. Just like our customers that may be frustrated, that might be dealing with financial issues, our internal employees may be dealing with this too. I go to a lot of places, talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people aren't even aware of their internal employee assistance programs. So make sure that we're advertising that, whether it's somebody dealing with substance use disorders, whether it's dealing with financial issues, right? If we're having to cut back on overtime or cut back on benefits or bonuses, making sure that our employees are aware of what's available to them, whether it's counseling, whether it's financial assistance, because you guys, we're all dealing with it, no doubt, like Barry was saying, and especially resources for furloughed employees. If we're having to lay people off, making sure you're giving them a way forward. One of the big things in this uncertain times is transparency. And so we need to be transparent with our employees about those layoffs or decrease in work hours. Make sure that these people are aware, because some people are living paycheck to paycheck or relying on that paycheck. And so we need to make sure that we're doing a good job of being transparent on what our intentions are. Another big thing, as we go back to work and you guys are starting to hire, one of the big things is the negligent hiring, making sure that we're still doing good practices. We understand that we may have to fill those positions, but what I typically find in a lot of these issues that I deal with, whether it's an internal threat, is there's usually an issue with negligent hiring. We didn't do our due diligence with hiring, or negligent retention. So we kept that person on after several violations, whether that's safety, whether that's showing up too late, whether that's substance use on the job. We need to make sure that we're still doing good practices during these times, because we're going to deal with it down the road. And those are definitely things that the law firms and legal teams are going to look at if, say, something were critical to happen. Moving on to the external threat, understanding that the relationship with law enforcement is critical for these things. Like I said, you need to establish that relationship so that you can have that time and resources dedicated to that threat, because our patrol officers are just busy. Another big part of it is Roanoke City has a trespass bar program. It's called Trespass Bar Program. That's critical for a lot of our places. And so what that is, if your local jurisdiction doesn't have it, one of the big things is to say we have that person that's made threats to an employee. Can you hear me? So say somebody makes threats to an employee, somebody calls over a customer, we can bar that person, and that gives us the ability to arrest that person on scene. That eliminates your potential for having to show up to court to testify against that person. And it can resolve issues on the spot. Another big thing is emergency contact updates. So for Roanoke City, you can go to our webpage, go to our dispatch center and update emergency contact list. That's one of the big things when we respond to 911 calls, alarms, property damage, fires, is we're not able to get in touch with key holders or somebody responsible for that site. And so if you guys have a critical incident at your facility, someone calls 911, has to hang up to deal with that irate customer or employee, we need to be able to have a list of people that we can contact. That helps us understand what's going on at the site, get key holders, and that may delay, damage to your property, whether it's a fire or a burglary, or some kind of active shooter. Another thing is making sure that you're set up for reverse 911 calls. One of the incidents that we had here, a critical incident, was when Michael Brown, the gentleman in Franklin County, that allegedly killed his stepfather, was loose here. In our neighborhoods, a lot of people, we pushed out reverse 911 calls to residents, letting them know to lock down in their houses because he was on the loose. Some people didn't get that because they didn't go on the website and register for reverse 911 calls. And so you need to make sure that your employees are signed up on that, your facilities are signed on that. So if 911, our dispatch center has to push out information, whether it's an active shooter on the loose or some kind of gas leak or something like that, we need to make sure that we can get those to the people that need to be aware of it. And Barry hit on it, talking about payment plans. Understand that we probably need to be putting out information now, PSAs, information about what their obligations are as customers, because you're going to have people that do think they don't have to pay for it, and when that bill comes, they haven't financially prepared for it, and it's going to sweep the rug out from underneath them. So making sure that we're putting out as much information as possible about their obligations, working with them on payment plans during these stressful times. Another big thing we talked about prior to this meeting is accountability for staff. Understanding we're reducing our staff numbers, probably out on jobs, so we need to increase the accountability for our staff members. Everybody has different capabilities, so whether that's through computer or making sure that you're checking out at sites and checking off when you go there, whether that's a phone call, we need to ensure those capabilities or what our policies are in place, because we don't want anybody left out there on a job and something critical happen to them. Even as low hanging, one of the things I talk about in like some small facilities that don't have those capabilities is you just sharing information or sharing your location with coworkers. So if you're out on a job, you can share your location through a cell phone. And once you're off that job and you move out of a geo fence that you can set for yourself, whether that's through Google or iPhone, it can remove that location on your phone. So that's just something low, easy hanging fruit that you can do to increase accountability for your people out there, especially when they're by themselves. We do have some crime prevention through environmental design recommendations. I'm going to push that out for you guys, I think, so you guys have a copy of it. There's federal guidelines and general things. These are like lights and making sure locks and keys and everything are good there. I'll be able to put that out for you. There's checklists that help you out. We have in Roanoke City seen an increase in commercial burglaries, especially now with people and being financial hardships. They're looking for things that can turn over quickly. And so making sure we have good key retention for our vehicles. I know a lot of facilities that I've done, they'll leave keys inside the vehicles. And we've had several large pieces of equipment stolen, vehicles stolen, property stolen, just based off a very simple thing of just removing keys from sites so that people can't steal that. Another big thing is internal theft, understanding that our employees are dealing with financial hardships too, and so I think a big thing is equipment auditing. I know we got a lot going on, but making sure that our equipment's still there where it needs to be, that it's not getting taken off of job sites. Because in these crazy times, people may resort to desperate things, and so making sure that we have the equipment we need is critical. For de-escalation tips, there's a lot of things, you guys, I can push out to you guys, obviously letting these people vent and understanding this is a very stressful time. One of the big things I think for us when we de-escalation is making sure that we give our customers a way forward. So we're not leaving them hanging out to dry. We're working with them on payment plans, educating them about what their responsibilities are, helping them move forward to resolve the situation. a lot of my complaints and threats that I get, the person just wanted to vent, and water authority just happened to be kind of the victim per se. So understand that we are going to be dealing with that, and that's critical that, like I said before, establish that relationship with your local law enforcement to make sure that that communication is clean and you can get resources in the time that you need for some kind of threat. So like I said, I know that's a lot of information, drinking from the fire hose. My name, Joshua Johnson. My email is joshua.johnson@roanoke.va.gov. I'd be happy to talk to anybody offline, recommendations, anything like that. And I think my time is up, so I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, Officer Johnson. That was a lot of good information. During your portion, Jim Cherry from Virginia Beach shared with us a checklist, and we'll make sure that's on our resource page. And that's basically going through that threat checklist that they've developed there at Virginia Beach. Excellent. Another good point. Yep, absolutely. Yep. And then we'll get your CEPTED stuff if you get it over to us. The CEPTED, the crime prevention through environmental. We'll get that posted on the Virginia Warren site too for folks, so they can have it if that's something you can share with us.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for your time.
Yep. And then we're also one thing I would like to point out to people is our customer relations before an emergency is going to carry us a long way through the emergency and after the emergency. So make sure you're sharing with them what information you can and when you can share it. In the absence of information, people make up things. It's better they're hearing it from you direct. So, okay. Let's go move on to the next slide. These are our Warren updates. Geneva, did you want to speak to this, or if not, I can?
I'm just happy to say, one, we haven't had any formal emergencies come into the Warren system yet, so that's a blessing that utilities are able to handle everything within their own amount of resources. But I did want to very happily welcome 5 new Warren members since we got started 6 weeks ago, and we have been promoting to you all the importance of Warren membership. We have had 5 new utilities sign up. So thank you for listening and joining in, and then also being an active member now with the Warren. If anybody would like information, we'll talk about it at the end, but it's a great organization and a great program to be a part of, and thank you to those people who have signed up.
One thing I would like to tell everybody is once we get a little ways past the stay-at-home order, once we're back in the normal swings, a lot of the stuff that we have forward-facing right now will go back to just being available to the Warren member side. So if you're taking advantage of what we have and you would like to keep using those resources, by all means, reach out to us. We're not going to shut it off the day after, obviously, but at some point it'll go back to just being, you have to be a Warren member to get to some of that information. Okay. Some of our best practices, we're talking about worker safety, which is kind of a timely topic with our 2 speakers that we had today. We started talking about resuming cutoffs in the future. How are we going to handle those customers? One of the things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, some of the utilities have gone to wearing body cams, especially when they only have 1 or 2 individuals out at a site, especially for anybody that may be doing cutoffs. If they're working alone, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have one. If you can do it, work with your local law enforcement, find out who they're using, if they have a purchaser that they typically deal with that might be able to help you out. But that may go a long way. One, it'll make your employee feel a little safer, and 2, people recognize what those body cams are, and it may help deter them from wanting to be too much in the face of your employee. We're looking at that phased approach going back into normal operations. Some of the systems have already started entering into those talks with ODW and their local health directors on what those processes should be. And then the public perception during this time, as we go rushing back out, are we making sure our folks are still wearing their PPE, their face masks? Are they looking like they're taking this serious, or are they just rushing out there to get it done? And Scott, you had a point on this, and I think Mike did too. If either one of you want to speak, I don't want to throw you under the bus here.
Well, we're obviously, most utilities are part of the public agencies, and so we believe it's critical to complement our member jurisdictions' actions. and expect that our employees, as we're going out, we're requiring the face masks, the social distancing policies. And again, just to your point, we recognize that we're showing an example to the community. And as businesses open up, that's going to be particularly important as we've already seen evidence in other states of problems developing, folks not wanting to comply with different sections of orders. And so I think it's going to be very critical that that all of us as public agencies and public servants are showing good examples with our employees out in the public.
Exactly. Mike, did you want to weigh in here?
Well, also to add to that, if like they were talking earlier, a lot of the utilities did not figure on pandemics being in their ERPs. The best thing they can do now is to write up an SOP for their staff to make sure they know that the guidelines and the directives so things aren't left in a gray area.
Absolutely. And then going back to some of what Barry was talking about making sure we're actually assigning dollars to those different functions, because one of the things we talked about is we don't want to rush to come out of this, have a lot of people sitting at home without money, but then we're increasing water rates to cover some things. So we need to have that open discussion, or at least that open dialogue out with customers as we do that. I know that we talked about some of the capital improvement projects are probably going to be tabled for a while to try to help stem some of that, those rate increases, but there's a lot of money that needs to be recuperated so that our businesses can stay, our water industry can stay active. I'm not sure if Barry's still on. He may have a comment here too around that. If you do, Barry, by all means, weigh in. I'm not trying to throw anybody.
Here.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things that I've been talking about is where we already have allocated earmarked funds for spending. It would be my suggestion that, again, if they're allocated and earmarked and available, spend those monies. We need to get funds into the economy. The economy is only going to recover based on how much money gets flowing back into the economy. So I know that we're all going to face budget issues and budget crunches, but where we have special allocations of earmarked funds and they're sitting there waiting to be spent, spend them. That would be my biggest suggestion.
Gotcha. I think we all can see the importance in that. Okay, next slide.
Oh, and Jim,
yes, sir.
the chat window just mentioned that it is the beginning of Drinking Water Week and Public Service Recognition Week. So I don't know how much we've done to highlight that. I think as part of our responsibility, we did some outreach, and I don't know if governor's proclamations still got through the system or not, but I would like to join Jim Cherry in saying that it is Drinking Water Week.
Absolutely. I know that ODW is working to allow for utilities to request some type of recognition certificate for their employees and for their utilities. So this might be a good week to do that. It'd be right in line with that. All right. So our supply updates so far, we haven't seen a lot of impact. We are seeing where people are having to spread their request out over some of the different entities. Instead of getting from one vendor, they may have to go to 2 or 3 different vendors. This is both around plant supplies and field supplies. We're seeing some impact around employee supplies, but as that slowly starts to pick up, one of the things that I would anticipate, and this is just me looking at the way things are going, as we're having to do all these different shifts with the separation and everything, I can see that at some point we're going to see some dollar increases around our normal supply. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about that as we're planning ahead and we're setting our budgets, that we probably are going to see some, maybe not significant, but we are going to see some incremental changes in what things are costing us. Scott, Mike, Barry, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah,
I think you've covered.
yeah, I don't know that I
Gotcha.
have anything to add, Ike. Thanks.
Okay. All right. And then we have our supply vendor list on the Warren website. Geneva, have we had any major changes to that?
No, we haven't had any new suppliers been added to it. We did get an email earlier today that Cintas, which was listed on the supplier list already, has just increased what they have available. And so there's a lot more of the most commonly requested products, PPE and household cleaners, that they appear to be able to help get for utilities. So if you have not yet reached out to Cintas, and if you're having a deficiency in one area or another, please try them. They are letting us know that they should be able to fill some of those requests.
Gotcha. We have one person that just posted in chat that the Department of Health Office of Environmental Health Services is wanting to know if any of the wastewater systems in Virginia are participating in COVID-19 virus testing. This is being looked at as a potential way to detect virus hotspots and develop a response. If any wastewater facilities are testing for COVID-19, BDH would like to hear about it. And then I've got email douglas.canody, CANODY, at bdh.virginia.gov with a brief response giving name of the utilities partners and if they have partners and a contact name. All right, Doug, so we pushed your message out. We'll see if we have anybody that emails you back. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to let you know that was only sent to the panelists, so I have just copied it. It's not that it's down there twice, but that has now been copied out for all attendees. Please go to your chat box and open it up if you're not already open, and you can get both the email address and the information on the question that was just posed to everyone.
Yep. And Hampton Roads responded back saying they are performing that type of testing out at their treatment plant influent. Okay. And then I saw that Officer Johnson already emailed us two items that we'll make sure we try to get on our, well, not try to, we will get on our Warren website for you guys to look at and pull down. Okay. Geneva, did you have anything else you want to add to that slide or?
Not to that slide, but I did change the slide and just wanted to let everybody know that the Warren program is very happily spending Drinking Water Week sending masks out. The masks from FEMA that we had originally heard might be available. Not only are they available, they are here. They're inside the state, specifically in Lynchburg. And I have mailed out over 50 packages of masks to utilities. And there are more that are coming on the way. I'm getting to them as fast as I possibly can. So please be patient. You should have them by this time next week. I would anticipate that everybody that has already requested them. If, however, you're on this call or you're listening in and you have not put in a request, there are more masks available. They sent us more than our original request was, which is a blessing. And so we do have more we can continue to send until that supply is depleted. On our website, under the Warren Resources page, we will put this link. I do ask just to keep from losing something in my email. We've switched over to a Google form that you can fill in all the necessary information, and then I will get notified that your request has been put in, and I will go to the website and get that information and hopefully mail it out in a very small amount of time. No more waiting 1 to 2 or 3 weeks. They're here, and that's just the best news that I think I can relay today.
Thank you very much. That's great news. One thing I will ask of all those that are on the call today, if you know of a utility that might need masks that have not got them yet or didn't know that we had them around drinking water or wastewater, please, please, please share this information. We want to make sure we get these into the hands of all of our utility brothers and sisters to make sure they have some level of PPE. Like I said, CDC is anticipating that we will have a second round of this come wintertime. Don't know to what extent, maybe a lot less, maybe a little more, but we do have masks to get out to everybody. So please, if you know a utility that has not partaken in it yet, if you can share that information, that'd be great. Or put them in contact with Geneva or one of us. Okay.
And just to reiterate, if you have already put in an email, if you've already put in an email request and you've heard from me, I sent a thank you back, or I've got your order just to confirm that you received it, your masks are on their way. This is only needed if you have not before requested it. This mask conversation is brand new to you and you've never heard it before, then we have a link and you can go and order them from this point forward. Here's one quick question I'm seeing in the chat window. Is there a use limit on the masks after which their reliability is diminished? If so, should we go ahead and order more now? The limit that the FEMA has put on the packet of masks when you get them, it says they can be washed and reused up to 15 times per mask. Inside of the package, you'll find you're going to get a sealed up container of 5 masks per employee. So the plan is that you simply take one of these pre-sealed plastic bags of masks per employee, and that should give them 5 masks to use each up to 15 times. So that should take you a considerable length of time to utilize up, but if we get to that point and we are going to a second wave or whatever, you may be able to make a second request. At this point, we're only issuing out 5 masks per employee, and that's per FEMA's guidelines. We'll wait and see if those guidelines change in the future, but for now, that's their method of disseminating these masks for us.
All right, thank you, Geneva. Doug, I don't know if you're still watching the chat window, but you've had a couple other people respond to your request about who's doing those studies. And then economic impact, our next slide. So we're still having this ongoing economic discussion through VML, VACO. We heard Barry talk a little bit about it. We heard Chris Pomeroy talk about it and Amanda talk about it last week. And I believe we have a poll question here, don't we, Geneva? So for those of you that can't see the poll question says, to your knowledge, is your utility currently participating in the VML and or VACO's economic assistance discussion? And your choices are going to be yes, no, not sure, does not apply. And if you're unsure, if you post in the chat, we'll try and get you some information. But this is going to be very important, especially for those of us that are going to probably have some monies that we cannot recuperate, people who are not going to be able to pay their bills. I'm hearing about large corporations that are actually starting to file bankruptcy based on what's going on with COVID. So I think we're all going to see a little bit of this economic impact on the back end. All right, so we have 1% say yes, that you are currently participating, 20% say no, 61% are saying they're not sure if their utility is participating, and 18% of you are saying this does not apply to you. Okay. All right. So this is I'm not going to steal this from Mike. This is Mike. He loves talking this piece. So if you're on, Mike, this is about joining the Virginia WARN.
Okay. I've been involved with the WARN program since about 1989. And one of the misconceptions that the public or the utilities have is that you have to pay to be a member, which there is no cost. We understand that a lot of the smaller utilities are not able to respond, but we are a resource to help them. Typically, you can call, if you're a member of WARN, you can call us and we will get there quicker and cheaper cost-wise to the utility than an outside contractor would be. Again, it's part of the OWEA Act and the AWW standards for the M19 manual. And one of the big things is, especially for the smaller utilities that they have to remember, is in a major event, if a tornado goes through their community, if there's a big storm that goes through their community and there's damage to property, most of your utility workers in these smaller towns also run with the rescue squads and the fire departments. Which hat do they wear? That's also a benefit to the communities because we can come in and help and they can do the emergency responding stuff too for their communities on the EMS side and the fire side. So those are the main reasons, and the fact that we're a phone call away is your biggest asset for getting help to you as quickly as possible. So,
All right. Thank you, Mike. So again, to reiterate what Mike's saying, there is no cost to join, and this is a benefit to all of our utilities if you can become a member. All right, next slide.
Well, we are happy to say that we are pretty much on time this time. We're not going to run over this week, which is great. It's nearing the end of the hour. But before we go, one of the most important polls that a lot of you wanted to see is the poll about continuing education credits. So thank you again to DPOR, as they do provide us the ability to give credits, water, wastewater, and engineering credits for these webinars. But if you need that, we ask that you complete this poll and let us know that you need the credit. What this does, by the way, it just captures your login email when you came on to the webinar. And this question specifically attaches to it and lets us know which category of credits that you need, so that way we can get it. We were asking for about 1 to 2 weeks. I am going to actually stretch that a little bit to help with efficiency. We're going to continue just to mark you as attended for these webinars. And then when we get closer to the end, we will be sending one transcript that should cover all of these webinars that you've indicated you need credits for. So therefore, you'll have one document to submit, as opposed to having to chase down 2 or 3 or 4 webinar transcripts. We'll just compile them all together and send you one, hopefully multiple webinar transcripts together. So I'm going to end the poll, and then I'll share the results just so that everybody can see. We have about 33% of our audience needing water operator credits, 26% wastewater, 37% engineering, and 20 of us are in the boat that I am, which is thankfully don't need credits. We're just here for the knowledge.
All right, thank you, Geneva. And like I said earlier, we do have that request out to DPOR to find out about the CPU requirement for the February 2021 year with everything going on. If they're going to extend that window to allow operators to have a little more time to roll up the CPUs they need. As soon as we have that information, we'll share that. All right. If you have any questions at all about anything you heard in the webinar or information you want more information on, please email any of the 3 of us, I should say any of the 4 of us to include Geneva, and we'll try to track that down. But Geneva's pretty busy, so if you can limit it primarily to either myself.
That's okay. Bring it on. We can take it.
Bring it on. I gotcha. But we'll definitely get back to you. So any requests or anything that you guys see out there, like the one about public health that we're trying to run down, and the one on the CPU extensions that we're trying to run down, we are happy to do this to help you guys out during this time. All right. Mike, Scott, do you have anything to say?
I just thank everybody for attending.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the speakers' participation today. I think it was timely topics.
Yes. I want to thank Barry Matthews from ODW and Officer Josh Johnson from Roanoke. Very appreciated having you guys on here. There's a lot of really good information for us. Things that we probably don't like thinking about, but we need to.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay.
Well, we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. It will be available, the recorded version, on our website by the end of the day, as well as you should be seeing a lot of new updates to the resource page. Go take a look at those, as by the end of the day, we should be able to post those things that we've received throughout. And again, if you need any other information, don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. We're happy to help.
Thank you all very much for joining us today.